24 years ago, I was sitting in a chair just like this. It's actually probably half squishy chair, half pew, sitting on my church up in Oregon. Everyone had left. It was your classic church in the 90s where it was kind of in a half round with a massive stage and the huge backdrop and the narthex behind you, which was another word for lobby. And then a balcony that went around, and I sat there, and I just looked around. And I literally started thinking about church. And that moment was probably 6 months worth of moments all brought into one place. And I sat there, I kind of leaned back, and I just really was thinking, is this what church is supposed to be? Like, did we nail it? Like, if we are we right on point of, like, if Jesus came, like, this is the church he'd go to? And as I was thinking and looking around and the people that were my friends that went to church with me, I realized almost every single one of us looked exactly the same. Almost all of us had the exact same theological backgrounds and beliefs. Almost all of us had the same ideologies. We all hung out at the same places. We had the same similar jobs. And I sat there and I just processed, is this what Jesus' church would look like? Would he sit in that church, in that chair, in that pew? Would he come here and be with us? Would he say, you know what, I loved the 2 songs, the announcements, the 2 more songs, the message, the 1 song, the benediction at the end. I love at the ending of your sermon how you had the piano playing just perfectly so you'd move me emotionally. I love that. And I really started wrestling with, what is this supposed to look like? More so with me. Because if I'm honest with you, I felt like my whole life I had just gone to church. I gone to youth group. I finished college, so I started serving in the youth group. My pastor told me to get in a small group, so I got in a small group. And then they told me I needed to be in a men's group, so I got in a men's group. But in every single one of these things, I just felt like I'm doing this because this is what I've been told to do. At some point, we all come to a place in our life where we have to start making big boy and big girl decisions and choose, am I going to step into this or am I going to step away from this? And here's the thing. As I dove deeper into deeper who Jesus was, I realized that that is the path that I wanted to pursue. As I got more steeped in the church, the more I began to question, is this the place that I'm supposed to be? I felt like I was on a hamster wheel. And I was just living my good Christian life and doing my good Christian things. And I was going to church for an hour exactly. And if the pastor went long, it was an hour and 7 minutes, and everyone was angry, and dinner would be late and frustrating. I'd miss half the game. But if church was done right, then it was good. It was on point. And I sat there in that season, and I wrestled. Like, people would come up to me, and they're wearing the bracelet. Paul, what would Jesus do? I'm like, well, he wouldn't wear that stupid bracelet, that's for sure. And I've always kind of been a little counterculture, but that did spark a question. Well, what would he do? Like, how would he do church? How would he walk through life? How did he walk? How was he? What was his circle like? And the more and more I read about Jesus, the more I realized that if I was going to fully pursue, then that was going to take me out into the mountains, metaphorically, out into the desert. That was a difficult path. That was a hard journey. There's a reason you see in scriptures that said, many followed, but more turned away. Like, it was too hard for people to continually follow in Jesus' path. But I really feel and felt like that's what I was supposed to do. So I got up out of my chair and I began to just pursue him. There's a passage in Mark. We've been going through the book of Mark, and it's in Mark chapter 2. And it says this, it said, then Jesus went out to the lakeshore again and taught the crowds that were coming to him. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me and be my disciple, Jesus said to him. So Levi got up and followed him. Read that verse my whole life. Pictured the story my whole life. Jesus is walking along the shore. He sees Levi. He looks at people. He says, hey, you, follow me. And they say, okay, I've heard of you. And they follow. And it's this simple little story. What I tell my students with Justice University is that you have to live and breathe and become a part of scriptures if you fully want to understand what's happening. So when you see this passage in Mark chapter 2, could like half you guys stand up? Just stand up real quick. That's not half. There you go. Thank you. I'm not going to embarrass you. So now you picture Jesus went to the lake shore. So there's this lake beside Jesus. And the water is constantly lapping up in these small waves. And I'm picturing the beach, it's a little bit rocky. I'm not picturing a sandy beach. And so I'm picturing Jesus walking along and there's this crowd. It says the crowds were coming to him. So as Jesus is speaking, Jesus is in the midst of this. And he's teaching them and he's walking with them. And as he's slowly walking, the water constantly is making this noise on his left. And people are pushing and trying to be closer to him. I think if you took like half of these people and we all squished in together, I think that's what it really was like. And there's people standing in the back and they're trying to see and they're trying to hear what Jesus is talking about. There's people on the boats and they're creeping in and they're trying to understand because they've heard about this Jesus. And so it says everywhere he went, the crowds were coming to him. As he walked along, so now you picture the story. As he walked along, Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at his tax collector's booth. You know when you were in junior high and there's the 8 cool kids? And then there's the 4 almost cool kids that are standing outside the circle, that they're just wishing that they could stand in that circle, but they know they don't belong. And then there's the kid on the bleacher that's watching all this happen, and he knows I'm not even going to step on the gym floor because I have no place down there. So you have Levi, somebody in the very, very top. Somebody up there, stand up. Very, very, don't be scared. It's all right, it's church. Somebody up there you go. Okay. So as he's walking along, he looks and he sees Levi. Now, Levi's at his tax collector's booth. He's not at the beach. He's up in the town. He's up above them, and he's in his booth, and he's just watching. Levi is the worst of the worst. Levi is Jewish, and he's taking money from all of these people, and he's giving it to the Romans, their enemy. Levi is wealthy. He's got his own everything, but he has nothing in his soul according to these people. So Jesus stops, and every single one of these people are saying, I hope Jesus sees me. I hope Jesus touches me. I hope Jesus calls me out. And yet he stands in the middle, looks at that guy way up on the top and says, Levi, follow me. So Levi got up and followed him. You can sit down. The thing is, it's not this simple little story. It's not this cute little tie it up in a bow. It's Jesus noticed this horrific man and said, follow me. That guy gave up everything. All of his money, all of his good standing, all of his history, everything. These people went, I think Jesus is confused because he just picked the wrong person. Like I'm literally standing right next to him. He chose Levi? Like that's not okay. I read that passage and I started processing all those years ago, okay, then who was in Jesus' circle? Like, who was Jesus' church? Because if he's choosing Levi, that's a weird beginning. In fact, it's wrong. In Mark chapter 2, the next verse 15, it says, later, Levi invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other notorious sinners. There were many people of this kind among Jesus' followers. We're talking notorious, B-I-G sinners, people that were absolutely should not have been there. Thank you. I'll be here all week. People of this kind. You ever been talking to somebody about them? I don't know why they're here. I wish they would go away. Don't really mean it, but I'm pretty cool if they die. Like, it's that much hate. It's that much disgust. Notorious people of this kind. You see, he's talking about the least. Jesus' circle was filled with the lost, the broken, the poor, the not good enoughs. The, why are you here again? I did a sermon a couple years ago about a triangle, a square, and a circle. And I said the square represents a box, and sometimes we as Christians and we as humans have a tendency to put the things that we like and love and respect in our box. And if you think like me, you can come in my box. And if you have my same things, you can put them in my box. And pretty soon, I have this box of all of my beliefs and all of my importance and everything that is me. And if your box matches my box, then we go through life together. And too often, that is what churches look like. Do you fit in my box? You're welcome. But then you look at Jesus' circle. And I realized Jesus' circle included the other people, the broken, the lost, the notorious sinners. I have one tattoo. It's huge. It's this little dot right here. If you're in like the first or second row, you can see it. It's not a dot, it's a circle. And I wanted it because I wanted to constantly be challenged of this idea of I am called to love everyone as Jesus loved everyone. I went into the tattoo place. I didn't tell my wife. It was a secret. I said, I need a perfect circle on my hand. He said, circles are hard to do. Can I do a square? I said, no, I need a circle. Because think about Jesus' circle. Last week, Palmer talked about Mary Magdalene, a sinner among sinners, prostitute, demon-possessed, horrific. And Jesus said, follow me. You look at Jesus, he also surrounded himself with all of these women that were leading and contributing and walking with him on his journey. In that day and age, that didn't happen. His closest circle was filled with fishermen. If you were a fisherman, that meant you weren't smart enough or good enough to continue in school. And all you could do was go out and fish. He filled his circle with business owners. He had people in his circle that were zealots. Simon the Zealot. The Zealots were a Jewish sect that they believed that if you spoke bad about the Messiah, or if you were pro-Rome, then they were justified to stab you and kill you. These were basically assassins. Simon the Zealot was trained in warfare, and it was known that if you spoke bad about the Messiah, they would casually walk by, stab you, kill you, keep walking, and be okay with that. He's in his closest circle. Jesus has his circle filled with the lame and the sick and the people you weren't supposed to touch. His circle, according to that day and age, was wrong. Like he missed the mark. When you ask the question, who was Jesus' church? Well, the truth is, Jesus said, everyone. Everyone is welcome. And what you saw then was the reality was the only people that really were in his circle were those who were willing to give up everything. And if you have everything, it's hard to give that up. And so his circle is filled with the broken, with the poor, with the lost, with the lonely, with the addicts, with the prostitutes, with the untouchables. And he said to them, follow me. When you ask the question, as I sat there, who was in Jesus' circle, who was in his church, then you go to the question, who wasn't? Like, who wasn't a part of that? Mark chapter 2, the next verse says this. It says, but then the teachers of religious law who were Pharisees saw him eating with tax collectors and other sinners. And they asked his disciples, why does he eat with such scum? The theological definition of scum is a low, vile, or worthless person or group of people. It doesn't get much worse than scum. The Pharisees, the teachers, the pastors, the religious right, those that were correct according to the world, saw Jesus sitting at dinner with Levi and his friends, and they said, why is he surrounding himself with scum? So who wasn't in his circles? These religious leaders that were constantly speaking evil against him. And we're constantly telling people, this isn't the Messiah. A brief history lesson. The Pharisees were the religious leaders that were correct in everything according to them. Everywhere they went, they were associating only with people that thought like them and looked like them and walked like them. And Jesus was not the Messiah because Jesus didn't step into their traditions. The Sadducees is another group of the religious leaders. And the Sadducees were wealthy. They were the elite. The Sadducees also were steeped in their deep, deep traditions. The teachers of the religious law were the interpreters of the law. They were the ones that knew the scriptures inside and out. And they never would have supported Jesus because Jesus, of course, didn't fit in their box. And Jesus didn't follow their traditions. And then you had the supporters of Herod. The supporters of Herod were the Jewish religious party that supported Rome. And they wanted nothing to do with Jesus because if they associated with him, it might cause them to lose their place politically and their place in their elite standing. So you have these religious leaders that are watching Jesus and standing on the outside and seeing who he's saying to follow me and talking with them and sitting with them and having dinner with them. And they're standing on the outside saying, this can't be the Messiah. You see, these are a group of people that had money and they had power and they had good standing. And if Jesus was the Messiah would come for people that looked like them and act like them and believed in the things that they believed. He never would have come for the scum, for the poor, for the broken. The real Messiah wouldn't do that. I'm sitting there and I'm reading this and I'm processing this and I begin to think about the question, okay, then who should be? Like who should be in Jesus' circle, in his church? In verse 17, it goes on and it says, when Jesus heard this, he told them, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. I have come to call not on those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. And I'm realizing his followers, his circle, his calling was the lost, was the broken, were those that had nothing. And then if you take a deep dive into what Jesus actually said, he said to people, you need to love more. You need to lead with compassion. You need to serve others. You need to embrace diversity. You need to lead with service. Avoid judgment. Seek truth and justice. Be a light in the world and to love your neighbor as yourself. Your neighbor is not just your neighbor. Your neighbor's that guy. And that's something that I'm wrestling with daily. To love my neighbor, but I can't stand my neighbor. Not my real neighbor. You see, we have these people that have been placed in our lives. and we wrestle through who they are and what they believe. And yet you see Jesus to love unconditionally. And the question isn't who should be in the church or in his circles, but what should the church be? Like, what are we called to do? What is all of this about? Micah 6:8 says this: He has told you what is good, and what does the Lord require you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And again, I think sometimes we read passages, but we don't allow them to sink down deep into us, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. I was reading this last week about that passage, and it said this. It said, both mercy and justice are motivated by compassion. Each requires a physical response at different levels, and each benefits from increasing awareness. Both can exist independent of one another, yet together they encompass the biblical concept of serving the least. Both mercy and justice are motivated by compassion. If I see something, if I feel something, and don't have compassion, it then says both can exist independently of one another, but there has to be a physical response. As a follower of Jesus, if I'm going to step into what it means to pursue him, not this idea of church, but this idea of church, like following Jesus and doing the things that he's saying, a physical response at different levels. Another quote I read this week says, sometimes I would like to ask God why he allows poverty, suffering, and injustice when he could just do something about it. But I'm afraid he would ask me the same question. You see, we are bothered by poverty. We are bothered by people that don't think like us. We are bothered by people, why don't they just get a job? Why don't they just do something with their life? Why are they just staying where they're at? World Vision is an amazing organization, and there's a passage in Matthew 25. The passage first says this. It says, they will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick in prison and did not help you? He will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. The founder of World Vision took that passage, but one of the things that Richard Stearns, who's the founder, he said this, their mission statement is, go to their mission statement. World Vision's mission is to follow Jesus Christ in working with the poor and oppressed to promote human transformation, seeking justice, and bear witness to the good news of the kingdom of God. So that's what they stand for. About 25 years ago, their founder took that Matthew 25 passage and rewrote it for the world that we live in today, back then. And here's what he wrote. He says, for I was hungry while you had all you needed. I was thirsty, but you drank bottled water. I was a stranger, and you wanted me deported. I needed clothes, but you needed more clothes. I was sick, and you pointed out the behaviors that led to my sickness. I was in prison, and you said I was getting what I deserved. Those are hard words for the world that we live in today. You see, I think we live in a place, or we sit in a place where we're comfortable. And how much of that comfort am I really willing to give up? So 24 years ago, as I sat here and I processed through all of this for 6 months to a year, I realized I had to leave. I had to leave my way of thinking. I had to leave my teachings. And I had to embrace what Jesus said, to love more, to lead with compassion, to serve others, to embrace diversity, to lead with service, to avoid judgment, to seek truth and justice, to be the light of the world, to love your neighbor. You see, because I thought the teaching was to do well, have a good life, have a family, go to church on Sundays, serve your church well, be in a small group, talk about Jesus every now and then, be kind to people. But that teaching is a radical transition. And as I began to leave emotionally and shift my thinking, it ultimately brought me physically into different places. And if you know my story, it brought us to live in Guatemala, our family. And when I lived in Guatemala, we were face to face on a daily basis with poverty. And when you're face to face with it, when these are people you know and love, you can't just say, "Can I pray for you?" Because they're asking you to walk through life with them. When we moved here to Chandler, I lived behind my wall, and to be honest, I was scared for a while because it's just too safe. And then we went that first year to Malawi, and I was confronted with the realities of extreme poverty again. And in that extreme poverty, I saw extreme hope and joy and love. And the words where Jesus says, "Love your neighbors," he doesn't say any of those things that I thought I was building my foundation on. He says to go and live this life that is walking with the least and the poor and the broken. That then brought us to move downtown Chandler. And what I realized is I went from wanting to serve once a month to now I got to serve every week to now it's living in the midst of it. And it changes your perspective when you know the stories of the people that live in places like that. One of the things I told my wife is I would watch people walking to work with their tool belts or their cleaning supplies or their big lunch boxes. I watched them walk down to the end of Colorado Street and walk across Chandler Boulevard and stand there at the bus station. And I told my wife, I said, what if, because for us, it's constantly this question of what more should we get rid of? It's just our journey, our quest. I found that when we get rid of more, it makes life simpler. I've worn the same black pants. I have 2 pairs. The same black shirt, I've got 3 pairs. Every single day for the last 5 years. Literally. Every now and then I'll mix it up. You can ask my students. But it makes my decision-making easy in the morning. But what it's done as well, it's taken away all the extras. All the extra, if I need new shoes, I don't just go buy new shoes. We pray about, hey, probably need to be thinking about some shoes because I've had these and I wear them every day for the last 7 years. And they're Doc Martens, so I probably got another good 10 years out of them. But all your belongings, everything, it's not as simple of just going and get something else. It's continually asking, God, what do you have for me, even in these small things? My daughter's car blew up in August. Not an explosion, just a teenager, early 20s, blowing up her 3rd car out of probably 5. And I didn't want to get her a new car, and I'd been already praying and thinking about this, and so I told my wife, I said, this is my opportunity. So I drove my car out to her mid-August, got on a plane, I flew back, and that Monday I walked down to the corner, I walked down Colorado, I got across Chandler Boulevard, almost got hit by 1 car. I had my app for public transport. I didn't know when the bus was coming. I didn't know how to pay for the bus. The bus came, and I got on. I tried to swipe my little thingy, and I couldn't figure it out, and the guy finally said, go sit down. And I sat down, and I knew I had to get off at Gilbert, so I got off at Gilbert Road, and then I knew the bus, I had to connect a link, and the bus was coming, and I saw it go right across, and I missed it. I'm like, well, I'll just catch the next bus, and so I'm standing there. It's 104 degrees. And 32 minutes later, the next bus came. I got on, came to the corner of Germain and Gilbert, and the bus driver pulled over, and I said, you have 2 more stops. He goes, no, I have a break. And I said, no, but you have 2 more stops. He goes, yeah, but I'm taking my break now. You can wait 20 minutes or you can get off. I took some breaths, and I got off, and I walked the last mile here. And for 6 months, I rode the bus because I wanted to understand not what does it mean to live in a community like I live in, but what does it mean to be? What does it mean to be dependent on that? And so I remember sitting on that bus and hearing stories and watching people. And I remember one day in particular, there was a single mom, and she had 4 kids. There were 2 guys that had had an extremely long, hard night that were passed out, almost falling over on a regular basis. There was a guy sitting next to me that had the biggest toolbox known to man, lunchbox, and we're sitting there talking in Spanish with each other. The bus driver is singing. And I remember getting off the bus and just thinking, this is beautiful. Like, to understand what it was like. I had people telling me, Paul, just go buy a car. I'm like, that's not how most of the world lives. To understand who the poor are, it's not just go buy a new car. We tell people, I just don't understand why they're living like this. Well, sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes life is so difficult it feels like you're just being buried. And I wanted to feel what that was like. And I remember I was sitting there. And as I'm sitting there, I honestly felt like God said, I see you. Follow me. You see, we have a tendency to be so busy and so wrapped up in the things that we think we need, and to do the things that we think we're supposed to do, that we oftentimes forget that 98% of the world has less than what we have in this room. And Jesus called us and told us to walk with the poor, to love the lost, to be with the broken, to love more, to lead with compassion, to lead with service, to avoid judgment, to love your neighbor as yourself. And when we ask the question, what should the church be? I think we should be and go to those places that we're being asked to go. I think we should step into the places that bring us uncomfortable. I don't think we should buy the things that I think we need. I think we should find the people that are broken and are hurting, and we simply just walk with them. We just be with them. You see, when Jesus looked across the room, across the way, and he said to people, follow me. I think they understood and were so desperate that this man is unconditional love. And he will sit and he'll have dinner with me, and he will love me for who I am. When that is allowed to happen, others slowly continue to walk closer and closer into his steps. And I think the things that we actually surround ourselves with aren't the things that God actually wants us to do. So my challenge for you is, when you look at who are you, I think the question should be, what should the church be, and how are you a part of that journey? And how are you changing the lives of those that are not here this morning, but are all around us?